This is a month ago. I was in San Francisco in an abandoned shipyard, actually, and this was a CEO of a startup talking to about 100 corporate. That's interesting. I didn't think that was possible. To about 100 corporate executives, and it was Ernst & Young, the former Ernst & Young, now called EY, had brought together 100 innovation executives with about 20 startup CEOs for 2 days to learn from one another. And I was intrigued by the tagline of this conference, which was the upside of disruption. So is disruption a familiar term to most of you? Disruptive innovation and disruption. So I'm going to ask you lots of questions, so it'll go faster if you actually raise your hands and give me a sense of what I need to explain. Don't worry about the content on this particular slide, especially the people whose screen isn't working. The point is that they thought the best thing they could do for their corporate clients was expose them to 20 startup ideas and put them together for 2 days in this unfamiliar surrounding where they could learn from each other. I want to consider this history of disruption because back when Clayton Christensen wrote this book, and again I'll ask, how many people in the room ever read Innovator's Dilemma or had some familiarity with it? Yeah? A few. Okay. Clayton Christensen, in a groundbreaking book, coined this phrase, disruptive innovation, as opposed to sustaining innovation, for changes, often but not always technologically driven changes, that altered an industry. And he asked the question, why didn't the companies already in that industry make these changes themselves? Why couldn't they invest in the new technology? And he said, good management itself was the cause. That the very decision-making and resource allocation processes key to the success of an established company keep those companies from making those investments, making those commitments. And he said also that those established companies that had succeeded did so usually by setting up a separate entity, aside from the core business, to exploit the new technology. And this was received as very disturbing news, because it meant you could not keep up with the external change within the parameters of your own company, as it was. So, disruption felt like a threat. Disruptors were the enemy. Startups were the problem in 1997. But in the same year, another book was published that was the beginning of the solution, by Henry Chesbrough at Berkeley, and it was called Open Innovation. And in it, he said that the future of innovation was to make the boundaries of the corporation more open, to get ideas not just from inside the company, but from everywhere. And a couple of years later, Wikipedia appeared. And I'm sure I don't need to ask for hands about Wikipedia. Everybody in here has used it. It's a totally open creation created by its users. And it was an example of open innovation that was persuasive enough that Jack Welch, does anyone know if we're going to get this screen? They're working on it? Oh, sure, blame the Mac. All right. Well, I apologize to the people over here who cannot see this, but I'll try and provide the content as fully as I can. In 2002, Jack Welch at GE had an exercise called destroyyourbusiness.com. And what he said was to each of his divisions that they should take their best people, put them off-site, and figure out if they were disruptors, how would they disrupt the business they came from. So he was taking Christensen's advice in the idea of separating the thinking about how to disrupt your business from the mainstream. And then the next step in this history is Procter & Gamble. Same year, 2002, Procter & Gamble created a program called Connect and Develop. And their theory was they had to grow about $5 or $6 billion a year. And in order to do that, they could not generate it from internal organic growth. And that they set a goal that half of their innovation would come from outside the company. So I'm going to play you a video, and happily for the people on my right, it's just a talking head, so the audio is all that matters. And this is Larry Houston, who was in part responsible for the creation of the Connect and Develop project, talking about why P&G did it. And I think I have to do this by hand.
The current R&D model is not sustainable to most companies, and we interacted with well over 20 companies on this issue. And then the key insight was this: we really did a lot of soul searching on how we can create value for our consumers. And what we learned was, in those rare instances where we actually found an idea outside, someone knocked at our door and finally beat their way through an outside idea that connects to our capability. Their capability married to our capability. When those connect, even when we have to pay, they're about 2 times as productive in terms of return on investment. So there was the seed of an insight. We can't do everything ourselves. We've got to create $5 billion a year at least. And guess what? There's so much outside. And what we learned was that in our areas of science, I have 9,000 people. The outside world has 1.5 million people, as good as Procter people. The other thing is, they didn't believe that they were as good as them. Okay, so a lot of arrogance there. And when we looked at that, and we basically fundamentally redefined our organization is 1,509,000 people, not 9,000.
It's a powerful concept. If you're willing to consider ideas from outside, you have 1.5 million people who can help you instead of your own 9,000. So even then, the P&G Connect and Develop program relied ultimately on about 70 technology partners and about 15 suppliers. So more open than they had been, but not truly open compared to what was to come. And if you just ask, what has changed since then? What I have over here is something you already know, is a graph of how the internet has grown in the last decade. So there's a kind of exponential vertical chart that says in 10 years, the total amount of internet protocol traffic has grown 30-fold. And that's a product of the number of users, which has tripled to 3 billion users in the last decade. Interestingly, the amount of information per page has grown by a factor of 4. So what used to be a simple page is now a complicated page, and yet it used to take on average 10 seconds to download a page. Now it's 2.5 seconds for 4 times as much information. So any of you wondering about whether digital transformation is a real thing, which we discussed earlier today, Eduardo, it's inevitable. The numbers are just too powerful to interpret any other way, because that's going to continue. So what? So now, open innovation could be truly open. And what I want to jump to now is 3 frontiers of corporate innovation and where they've come to now, and then we'll turn it over to Nick and different cases. So the 3 are crowdsourcing, corporate venturing, and working with startups. So the first crowdsourcing example that was a company was Innocentive, which appeared in 2001, I believe. And the idea was you could have an innovation problem. This was begun within Eli Lilly, by the way. You could have an innovation problem, and instead of trying to solve it with the equivalent of your internal 9,000 people, you could solve it with the whole world. And so I just, I took an example off their website this afternoon, bonding of polymeric materials without adhesives. I don't happen to know what that means, but it's a problem that you would ask an R&D group to solve. And I took a random solver, as they call it. This is Jatinder Hansbal, who was educated in India in biochemistry and then got a PhD at Madison University. But he found the problem that someone had posted on this website, saw that they would pay $2,500 for a solution to the problem, had the solution, and made his money that way. So you think about Uber, this is Uber for intellectual work, in a sense, where you can post your problem, and somebody who knows how to solve that problem can solve it. Now here's one other slightly different example, you're going to hear in a minute about customer-led innovation. WorldQuant is a hedge fund, a large hedge fund in Connecticut. Their name says what they are. They're only quantitative. You get no hunches about investments, just numbers. So they put up something called WorldSim on their website. And WorldSim is a simulation of the financial market. And they invite you or anyone, quantitative, to come and simulate your investment idea in their market. So maybe you have 50,000 euros to put behind your idea. WorldQuant, if they simulate your idea and they like it, they could put 50 million or 500 million behind it. And they give you, as the creator of the investment idea, a percentage of it. So that your idea gets more of what it's worth than it would have if you'd followed it on your own. So completely net-enabled piece of open innovation. Let me move on to corporate venturing. And Sergio described some corporate venturing that Bankinter is doing. But let me talk about what has changed in this. There have been, in the US, 4 rounds of corporate venturing. And the first 3 each were responses to a boom market, where companies that had excess cash thought, how can they participate in this boom? And they ended for financial reasons. According to Boston Consulting Group, the boom in corporate venturing that started in 2005 is not motivated primarily by financial return in the investments, but by seeking innovation, technologies, ideas, and talent. So what you see is that in past booms, these numbers were on the order of $1 billion at their peaks. In the current boom, it's from $2 to $4 billion. And I think I'll skip this. And just say it has grown to the point where 1 in every 5 venture capital deals has a corporate venturer in the syndicate. So corporations represent something like, no, I'm sorry, I can't say that. Just 1 in 5 has a corporate investor. And in the US in 2014, the total of corporate venture funds was about $12 billion. So it's a material source of funds to ventures and a material source of information to corporations. All right, last, working with startups. We talked about Connect and Develop, a very early breakthrough made by P&G. Today, Unilever is among the leaders in working with startups and attracting startups to their ecosystem. So again, well, I'll show you a video in a minute, but if you go to the website of something called Unilever Foundry, you see that they engage in pilots where if you have an idea as a venture, they will do a pilot with you. They gather people in what they call hacks, where you invite people to come and solve a problem. They crowdsource business ideas. They crowdsource sustainability ideas. They even provide mentorship for startups. So they are trying to offer an interface to the world that allows both Unilever and potential and startups to gain. And I have another video for you in which they explain what they're up to.
In a VUCA world, we have to continually think about the changes that are going on around us. We need to innovate, and innovate on an ongoing basis. The foundry process is pretty straightforward. It has 4 simple steps. The first one is the brief, then the pitch, then the pilot, and hopefully the partnership.
We engaged the Foundry because we had a specific challenge that we wanted to tackle. The challenge that we have in today's environment is that the store is becoming stale. What new technology or startups could help us to change the way that we interact with shoppers?
Nervalia's focus is to add interactivity to everyday printed items. Ink.
Nervalia definitely met.
So in the 4 walls of Unilever. So we're looking for innovation through collaboration, ways to engage with others to create new ideas for the future.
We wanted to find something new and different to amplify the new variant of the brand, perhaps. So the Foundry came with the idea of Sofa Sound.
So far puts on secret gigs in people's living rooms in over 100 cities around the world every month.
We wanted to be something modern, something that is out there connecting with our guys and delivering something much more understated, which is the concept of the new variant, so it was a perfect match.
The Foundry is different because historically, a company like ours would do lots of market research, we'd even do test markets, and when it was perfect, we'd launch it and launch it big. And what this is about is creating the ability to launch and learn, to adjust as we go, to craft as we go, and in that way, create a different way of innovating for the future.
They just found the right partner, brought to us, and we are now making it happen to launch next year.
For us, we can tap into startups and see innovation, new ideas, new ways of doing things. But of course, for the startup as well, they can tap into really big brands, and also brands that have real geographic reach and budgets. So really, on both sides, we both win from this.
Working with BACS has given us the opportunity to take what we normally do and supercharge it.
It's good for them because we can make that bigger, and it's good for us because they exist already and they're already talking to our target.
I think the Foundry is going to change the way we do things moving forward.
Where the magic really happens is when the power of our brands and our marketeers combine with the ingenuity and the innovation of the startup. Individually, interesting, together, invincible.
So I think Iker is going to talk a little about that combination later on. The thing I want you to think about is we had this breakthrough from P&G on a limited basis as networks began to grow. Then we got corporate venturing, and venturing is easy because we know how to make an investment in a company. There are laws about that, and securities regulations. But just now we're at a time when companies are figuring out a playbook for partnering with people with ideas. I think Unilever is on the leading edge of that, and their approach is ambitious, but they're putting it out there and have a set of internal protocols for taking advantage of the ideas of others in less structured, more spontaneous ways. So I think that is where the frontier is today in corporate innovation. So the last thing I will say is just this, that as you think about the responsibility to keep a business up to date. We have this evolution from the innovator's dilemma, in which disruption was a threat, to a world in which you can have a conference about the upside of disruption, because disruption is the way an established corporation can keep up.